me light in my heart, light in my grave, light in front of me, light behind me, light to my right and light to my left, light above me, light below me, light in my bones. Oh, Allah, increase my light everywhere. Oh, Allah, grant me light in my heart. Ameen. Ameen. Light on my skin and light in my hair, light in my flesh, light in my blood, light within myself, light on my tongue, light in my eyes, my ears, light in front of me, light behind me, increase my light. Oh, Allah.
Hi everyone, good afternoon from Kenya. My name is Farida Abdul Basit. I'm going to be the moderator for the session today. I hope everyone can hear me very well. So I think the program was projected a few seconds ago, and we have all seen how this day or just the next few hours are going to go. I'm going to kickstart the program with a word of prayer, and I'm going to do it in English. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the universe and the creation, the most gracious, the most merciful, sovereign of the day of reckoning. You alone we worship, and you alone we seek for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have bestowed your grace, not those whom you have earned your anger, or those who went astray. Amen. So today we are here. I would like to appreciate everyone for the time that they have dedicated to be here today to participate in this webinar that is aimed at giving all of us the knowledge on the rights and gender rights of women in Islam. Issues of gender perception and gender equality has been a key contentious issues in most of the countries that we are in, especially through different interpretations of the Quran, especially through how culture has also instigated itself within the religion. And we all know that gender has been one of the issues that the entire world is talking about. And there's just an incident, I think, that has been going on a few weeks ago of the young girl who was beaten to death because her hijab fell off. And the entire global was in an uproar. People were tearing off their hijab. People were talking against it. So we know gender equality in different dimensions has been a very emotional issue for many people. As such, Faith to Action Network, Muhammadiyah, and Al-Azhar University has organized a series of dialogues aimed at discussing different gender issues in Islam, including the rights of ownership of property of women, the rights, bodily integrity, issues of gender equality. And this is the fourth of the 6 dialogues that are supposed to take place from March up to now. And today we are going to be discussing majorly on advancing gender equality in Islam. We have different speakers with us here today, and I think we were just discussing a few days ago that somehow all the panelists are women today. So I guess the topic is going to be more passionate because it affects them directly. So the first speaker is going to be Professor Alimatul Kiptia. She has done a paper on gender concepts in Islam, issues of sex vis-a-vis gender, understanding interpretations of the Quran, putting the context around some of the issues that we interpret and some of the issues that are translated, avoiding direct translations of issues based on different circumstances. And I think she's here today to give us a brief of what she's done, her perspective of the work that she's been doing in the institutions that she represents here today. She's also a commissioner in the National Commission on Violence Against Women. She's the founder of Academic Feminist Muslim. She's done a lot of work on gender equality and representing women in the global sphere, also Muslim women in the global sphere. So welcome, Professor Alimatullah. You're going to have 8 minutes to talk about your paper and your work. And then we are going to have a short question and answer session from me for about 7 minutes. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending this webinar. Okay, I'm going to talk about the gender concept in Islam. If we're talking about gender issues, there are a lot of women's problem that experienced by women in society in the form of subordination, violence, marginalization, negative labeling, and excessive burden. Women experience almost 4 times the domestic and caregiving burden in Indonesia during the pandemic. In some cases, many men also experience psychological pressure because they are not free to express their sadness and fear. There are also many demands as the main breadwinner that makes men experience a crisis of masculinity. Problem of gender inequality, both experienced by women and men, occurred apart from misunderstanding the concept of sex and gender and the influence of the patriarchal culture, and also because of misogynic and non-progressive religious interpretation. As we know that the word sex or natural and gender is a construction are often misunderstood and overlap in society. Sex is the difference between men and women and their reproductive function, which are natural, non-interchangeable, and also, if we're talking about gender, is the difference between men and women, which is a social construction. It is not natural, can be exchanged and carried out according to according to the agreement and also the contact in the family and society. Misogynic and textual interpretation of religion often do not study the causes of the revelation of the Quran and also the history of the Hadith. And also they do not pay attention to the relationship with the other normative foundation and ignore the language analysis. This interpretation often has impact on vulnerability and position of women as number 2 after men. Women do not have autonomy to do activities outside the home, and also sometimes the wife obedient to her husband is absolute. Among the normative foundation that are often read as without looking at the context, as for example, the Quran Surat An-Nisa, Ar-Rijalu Qawwamuna 'alan Nisa, for example, and also Al-Azab 33, Waqarna fi buyutihunna, and also the Hadith, yeah, which sometimes there are some Hadith that also, if you understand textually, then create a misogynic understanding. As we know that Islam recognizes the heavy and not easy tasks for women on reproductive tasks, such as menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, and also breastfeeding and premenopause. In the Quran Surat Al-Baqarah 233, it is stated that the task reproductive women is heavy and tiring because it must be helped to reduce their burden by family members or their partner or by the state regulation. The basic value in discussing gender issues in Islam, that is the religion, is Tawhid, which uphold justice and benefit. Tawhid in the sense that only Allah has the right to be worshipped, not a wife to serve husband or vice versa. While justice in Islam is fair to all creatures, including men and women, and prioritize the benefit of the ummah. Islam is rahmatan lil alamin. The hadith narrated by Muslim also confirmed that the Prophet Muhammad sent to the earth is to be a mercy, not to be a curse. For example, narrated from the Abu Hurairah, he said that the messenger of Allah, he was said that, pray for the evil of the polytheism. And then the Prophet Muhammad replied, I was not sent to be a curse, but I was sent only to be mercy. The general principle of discussing gender equality is human dignity, equality relationship, and also the utilization of the potential of both men and women based on several normative foundation. For example, the first, men and women are both perfect creature. Laqad khalaqnal insana fi ahsani taqwim. And also the second one, men and women are equally obligated to be a khalifah on earth. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifah. Men and women are equal to do a good deed and also in good deed in public life. Men and women have the equal potential to achieve achievement. And also men and women are equally responsible for all their action. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. A person quality is not based on gender, nation origin, also appearance, but it depends on the piety. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The piety is the quality of the person, men and women, is based on the piety or taqwa. The Prophet Muhammad made many foundation changes in their life of women. He forbade women to be buried alive, prohibited from the becoming inheritance, have right to inheritance, and also prohibited from the guaranteeing debts, prohibited from the prostitution, and also guaranteed their right as human being, as men. The Prophet Muhammad lived as monogamous family for 25 years. He also doing his domestic tasks, and also forbid Sayyidina, and he do not forbid Khadijah from doing her business. Someday Umar bin Khattab said that at first we do not consider women honorable and important. But when Islam came and God mentioned them, we just realized that women also have autonomous right, which we can no longer intervene. Based on the Bayani foundation in the Quran and Hadith, as well as the testimony of Umar bin Khattab, accompanied by empirical data that strengthening the implementation of gender equality and justice, it can be concluded that Islam theologically support the values of gender equality. Theologically, men and women have the same position before God and equally encouraged to maximize potential in all areas. But biologically, men and women have different reproductive tasks. In the Quran, it is explained that the task of women reproductive is very heavy and tiring. Therefore, it must be helped to lighten and strongly encouraged to consult in carrying out these tasks so that their human rights are not neglected. If this idea of gender equality are implemented properly, not only women will be happy, but their life will be better, but all citizens of the nation, including men, also will be get benefit and also will be happy forever. I think that's the point that I can share tonight, and then we can discuss in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. That was very good and very educative. I just have a few questions for you. I hope you'll be able to answer. Number one, do you think there are challenges in terminologies such as feminism that contribute to the faith actors' opposition of gender equality? Do you think specific words make it difficult for faith actors to embrace gender equality, such as the word feminism?
Oh, okay. I think sometimes gender equality movement associated with feminism. Yeah, and if my opinion, in my opinion, feminist is someone, man or women, who aware that women have problem, and they try to solve that problem, and the result, women have a better life. So by this definition, I think the Prophet Muhammad is also feminist because he tried that, and because he aware that there is women problem at that time, and then he tried to solve that problem, and then finally we are here as a women Muslim. Yeah, so we have a better life. I think we thought the Prophet Muhammad did something for women. I think we can be a speaker in this great conference. Yeah, so I think we have to explain about the definition of feminism clearly, that this is something that actually to increase women life, and then try to return to the original or basic teaching of the Islamic values.
Thank you. Thank you. And do you think there are opportunities for Islamic institutions to change their mentality on issues of gender equality? What are some of the opportunities that we can actually explore to assist Islamic institutions to change their mentality on issues of gender equality?
Yeah, I think if we're trying to collect the normative work from the Quran and Hadith, the universal justice, universal values that recognize men and women are equal before God, I think there are a lot, a lot. For example, as I said before, that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, which is the most honorable person is based on the piety, not based on the gender, for example. And also in ja'ilun fil ardi khalifah, it means that men and women have to responsible to do something good in the society. And the Prophet Muhammad give the example, give the good example how to have a women's right, recognize women's rights, not only men's right. So I think we have a lot of normative work in the Bayani, in the Bayani level, which stated in the Quran and Hadith. And the second one, we also try to convincing the Muslim society about the Burhani level, which is relating to the knowledge, relating to the reality, relating to the data, the research, that something that, for example, women who have a good opportunity, they have a happy life, for example. This is something that Burhani level, which is we try to give information based on the research and data to the society. And the last one, using our heart. Using our heart, Bayani. Because if there is a woman that she is neglected her right, if she is your daughter, if she is your wife, your mother, what is your heart? So what is your Irfani level? So we have to consider the Bayani level, Burhani level, and Irfani level, which is normative work. And second one is empirical and research and knowledge. And the last one is our heart.
Thank you, Prof. That was very passionate from you. Thank you very much. I see a few members of the audience have raised their hands. Please let all the panelists or the speakers present their papers, write down your questions, and once they're done, I think we'll open this up to the audience to be able to ask the questions. The next speaker is Annie. Welcome, and it's your floor to present your paper. Annie is the president and founder of Muslims for Progressive Values, the oldest progressive Muslim organization in the US. That's very good. She also serves in the UN Interagency Task Force Faith Advisory Council and was commissioned by the UN Office on Genocide Prevention and the Responsibility to Protect to create an anti-hate speech workshop for Muslim societies. So welcome, Annie.
Thank you, Farida. Peace, greetings, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I am very appreciative of Professor Alimatul's context from which she spoke and how she spoke about the heart and how she spoke about human dignity. So I really appreciate that. So I want to frame the discussion of my paper, which is, the title is a bit long. It is called Engaging Imams for Shi Champions to Catalyze Sustainable Social and Cultural Change Towards Fully Achieving Women and Girls' Rights in Muslim Societies. So the framing from which we operate from is that Islam is equated to meaning peace, but in real terms, in human life terms, peace cannot be achieved without justice. That, coupled with Maqasid al-Sharia, is also at the heart of Islam, which gives us the concrete set of guidelines from which we operate. So the program that I'm going to be discussing today is Imams for Shi. It is our program that we basically have implemented the theology of Islam, of women and girls' rights, into practical terms. The Imams for Shi program is something, a term we borrowed from UN Women, which is called He for Shi. And what we decided to do is take the He and flip it and made it into Imams for Shi. And the context and the advocacy is based on these particular values, and that is, we are against female genital mutilation and cutting. We are against child forced marriages. We are for the self-determination of women, the right to higher education, the right to work outside the home, the right in marriage as well to earn property, to inheritance, etc. And the activities from which we implement these particular values are two ways: the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. In regards to the top-down approach, it is an agreement between the imams and the program itself. That is, they have to preach the egalitarian values, women and girls' rights, at the Friday prayers. So when the community hears these narratives about empowering women and girls' rights, that itself helps shape their thinking. That itself helps shape their mentality towards women and girls' rights in the home. So I have experienced myself in this particular context. When I spoke at a mosque in Burundi, I was speaking to 75 mothers about the issue of child and forced marriages. And what is really important to understand, that you have to speak in their own terms, in their own language, and what is relevant to their society. And so in this regard, I was debunking that the fact that child and forced marriages, number one, is against the teachings of Islam, it's haram. Number two, the context of meher. Who receives the meher? Most of the times it's the parents that receive the meher. It is not the bride. This too is haram and forbidden in Islam. Number three, how much do you get for meher? $500, 500 euros? Well, what does that bring to you as a family? Nothing. If you had supported your right for your daughter to go to school, to higher education, to eventually get a job, she can support you for the rest of your life. Isn't that better? And you can see that the women's faces smile, because they can see how this is definitely much more beneficial, not just for their daughter, but also for themselves, and also for the society and their community. So the second program that we have is something called Clubs for Shi, whereby it's a subsidiary program of Imams for Shi, and we have young women, about 35, stay overnight for 4 nights. Now, in a conservative society, having young women stay overnight itself is already an accomplishment, where young women are expected to be home by sundown. And during these 4 days, we teach them critical thinking, we teach them about all the stuff that Professor Alimatul was talking about earlier, all the great theology about women's rights in Islam that we already know, but is not being practiced in society. We teach them about their rights in marriage, because a lot of them don't even know that they have such a thing as a nikah contract, whereby they can dictate the terms of their marriage. they don't even know the international law about supporting their women's rights as a woman, as young women. And so when I see this, I also attended one of this program. When I see them leave, by the time they leave, you see their eyes light up. You see they have a personality. You see that they now have some aspirations and a purpose in life. And so for me, this is just one of the most beautiful things to witness. Another program that we also implemented in Imams for She is we partnered with an imam to develop a curriculum, an inclusive Islam curriculum rooted in human rights. And it's implemented through our Imams for She network at their mosque. And what is really beautiful to hear is when the imams come back to us and say, you know, we have never had a tool and how to teach women and girls' rights. We don't know how to do it. And it's also very heartwarming to hear from parents who come back to us to say that they didn't know there was a different way of teaching about Islam. So the curriculum was, again, created by our imam partner, and it was also endorsed by the Grand Mufti of Burundi at that time. And the last program is activity, is a radio show. We have a 30-minute radio show for a few years where the imams would talk about the women and girls' rights on a weekly basis, and they would bring on women's rights activists to have that conversation, to share their experiences. And we would also have women victims also to speak about their experiences. The impact has been really unexpected in many ways. We have non-Muslims who now realize that there's a different way of looking at Islam, that there is a non-radical, non-hateful interpretation of Islam, and they have a new respect for Islam. We also see there's a rise in interest of young women attending higher education and universities. And the indirect benefits is that one of our imams has won elections by 72%. When you are out there in the field, when you are doing the good work, out of your heart for the better of your community and for the better of your society, people will come to you, you will become more popular. We have seen members of the Burundi community, villagers go to the next village, to our imam, to our mosque, because they prefer the imams in our network, in our Imams for She. And so this is the cultural shift that we have seen in real terms in regards to how people are being reshaped in the context of Islam for women and girls' rights. I turn it back to you, Farida.
Thank you very much, Annie. That is very great work that you do. Congratulations on the work that you do.
Thank you.
I have just a few questions, 2 or 3. The first one, what specific institutions or structures within the socioeconomic sphere that you think hinder women and girls from reaching their potential and exercising their rights? They don't have to be formal institutions.
Yeah. It's sad to say this, but from what we have seen, the problem is the Islamic institutions themselves, because you have imams and sheikhs coming back from these from abroad, from these higher education, and they come back and they teach, advocating for domestic violence, advocating for a lot of the harmful practices that contradicts the Quran. And this shapes the society, because if this is what they're hearing in public, this is what trickles down to the family unit. So you just imagine in the family unit, you have one family unit where they raise their children in love and compassion and help lift all their children, and you have another family unit that is very oppressive. Which one do you think is going to excel? Which one do you think is going to live up to their God-given right and to what is their aspirations in life? So I think it's really important for us, for religious institutions, maybe to not just teach the theology, but to also teach how to teach that theology, how to bring it back to terms to the society where the Quran is relevant for the better of society.
Thank you. I think you've answered my second question, but who else has to be included in this conversation so that the change can be more sustainable?
Well, it's important to be transparent, and so the program that we have obviously is open to public. It's open to public scrutiny. And like I said earlier, you see that the non-Muslim religious leaders and that also has trickled down to their particular community and how they relate to the Muslims. You have to understand the Muslim community that we work in Burundi are self-segregating themselves largely in the northern area, and they speak Swahili, and whereas the national language of Burundi is Kirundi, and so that in itself bodes suspicion to the Muslims that they are not really patriotic Burundians, right? And because they dress differently, for example, they don't dress in the Burundian print and so on and so forth. So all these are really cultural aspects of the work that we do that is actually really important in order to be accepted within the larger institution and the non-Muslim institution. And then you also have to talk about, and also in relation with the government, because the government needs to know, especially in oppressive societies, the government really needs to know what you are doing as Muslims, because again, there's suspect of you being a radicalized society. The Muslims are seen as radicalized. So when the government actually knows that what you're doing in empowering women and girls is benefiting, for example, the women that we have created co-ops where they start businesses. So instead of one, they start out with one shop, now they have 5 shops. And as a result of that, they have income for their children to go to school, including the women and the young women and girls. This also brings them up to the level of the average Burundian, where the majority of those attending universities are non-Muslims. And so when the government sees the benefits of the program, because then it feeds into the development of the country, it feeds into the national action plan of the country, which then leads to the sustainable development goals of the country, then the government sees that this is for the benefit of the society. This is also very important because then it deters the radical imams that try to influence the government in shutting us down. This is also some of the experiences that we're going through in the field. Our imams are under attack. They've suffered from assassination attempts. They have suffered from a constant fitna and accusations of apostasy, which is really sad because we are just trying to bring the good work, the words of the Quran to society, and yet we are going under attack. So it's really important to be transparent and for the society themselves to see the benefit of it. And when the community is on your side, you are also on the winning side. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Annie, for your presentation. Wonderful presentation.
I want to say one more thing though, Farida, because I think I think it's important for all of us attending here, for those who are scholars, for those who are in public universities or in universities in general. And Nani Alamatu, you have your thesis, but you're also a professor in your position. I think it's important to take the program that we did in Imams Fashi as an example of a model that you can teach in your class, that you can maybe use in your particular community as well. But I think it's also important that we share these experiences because there are some really good experiences that is happening in the field. Thank you.
Now we will go to the next speaker, that is Dr. Mervat, and she's an assistant director of the International Islamic Center for Population Studies and Research. She's here to give us a few theoretical and theological illustrations on issues of gender equality in Islam, presenting some of the key issues that have been there in the religion, some of the key writings and sightings that have been there in the religion that promote gender equality. So welcome, Dr. Mervat.
Starting with that Islam, in some Muslim country, the society does not consider men and women are equal. This is based on the misinterpretation and misconception of Islamic Sharia. And actually, Islam observed in its legislation, ruling, command, and prohibition equality between men and women, taking into account the moral difference of each in order to achieve happiness in their situation and their destiny in achieving equality and justice between them. in a way that allows each of them equal opportunity on the basis of what God Almighty has given each of them. And based on a holistic vision, Islam has given women full rights in different fields. In human fields, the Islam honor humanity in its two forms without distinction between male and female. In many verses of the Quran, Surah Isra, Surah An-Nisa, and Surah Al-Hujurat, Islam emphasizes this principle in many verses of Hadith and of the Prophet, where the verse of the Noble Quran indicate that there is no preference in humanity between man and woman. Economic and legal field, Islam has given its full capacity and full equality with women at various levels in order to work and acquire and to have rights that entail this. The general philosophy that governs human life and behavior, especially between men and women, is based on equality of rights and duty and not symmetry or conformity between men and women. Women are the sister of men, as two types of the same sex created from one soul, with common task as sex and different task as two types, male and female, which is a distinction in the roles of function assigned to each of them with equal right and responsibility and equality. Here does not mean symmetry. Men and women must complete each other within a system multifunction rather than competing with each other within the one-side society. Equality for financial right, Islam abolished all that was worked before, depriving women of ownership or restricting them in the conduct of what they own, and prove to them the right to own property for all its reason and to dispose of its legitimate type, legitimize the well and inheritance to them like a man, even if they are rich or with a job, and give them the right to sell, buy, rent, gift, charity, followed by the right of defense their money. Islam has established that men and women are equal roles in the society and both participate in serving their community. Allah said, the believer men and women are protector one of another. They order what is right and forbid what is wrong. They observe prayer and pay their prescribed zakah and obey Allah and His Messenger. God will give His mercy to such people. God is Almighty and wise. Surah At-Tawbah. In Islam, men and women are also similar in punishment for their bad deeds. Allah said the hypocrites, both men and women, are all the same. They order what is wrong and forbid what is right. They are tight-fisted. They have ignored God, so He has ignored them. The hypocrites are the disobedient one. God promises the fire of hell as a permanent home of the hypocrites, both men and women, and the believers. This is enough to them. God rejects them and lasting punishment waits them. In Surah At-Tawbah. The Quran said, whenever does evil will be repaired with its like, whenever goes God and believer, be it a man or woman, will enter the paradise and be provided with without measure. And also equality for education. Islam endures equal right to care and education for both male and female. Islam established the principle that seeking learning and education in a religious duty to be fulfilled for both male and female. The Prophet, peace be upon him, urged his companion to learn to write, and it has been proven in several ways that Shafa bint Abdullah al-Muhajir al-Qurashi taught Hafsa bint Umar, the mother of the first faithful, to write, and women participated with men in quoting science with the guidance of Islam, so they are narrator of the Prophet Hadith and antiquities narrated by men, and modernize testify that all the narrators of the Hadith of women are hosted and did not accuse one of them. It is known that everything that Allah the Almighty has imposed on his servant is shared by men and women, except for what is excluded from what is specific to women because of their femininity, with the intention of relieving them. Islam instructed all believers to be just and to be injustice. Islam has highlighted, contrary to the common believer, that women are capable of making responsible decisions. There is nothing in Islam which hits at any lack of wisdom by women. Women are accountable to their action just as men are. Women are endowed with the same capacity as men to make sound decision and judgment. God would not hold women to the same accountability as men if he has not endowed them with the same wisdom. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Melvat. Thank you very much for that. I just have a few questions after your presentation.
Okay.
I hope you're open to some few questions from me. You have given us examples of how Islam has promoted gender equality and some of the citations and also situations in which gender equality has been observed in Islam over the years. In your experience, in what ways have different people abused the religion and misinterpreted it to actually propagate gender inequalities?
Actually, because of the misinterpretation of some verse in Quran and some weakness hadith propagate gender inequality, while Quran and authenticated hadith called and promote gender equality, Islam give women right more than any other religion, policy, or civil laws.
Thank you. Also, what do you find inspiring to be able to work in the field of promoting gender equality? What is your inspiration? And also, what is the biggest challenge in actually propagating for gender equality?
Actually, being a female professor working in one of the most prestigious universities in over the Islamic world, I share in preparing many manuals, books, and training programs that address women's rights and violence against women. I was inspired by the true position of the Islam regarding the gender equality and women's rights. Islam is supportive to women and is against violence against women. And also, however, due to high illiteracy among women and the patriarchal interpretation of text, this information is not known for women.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mervat, for the wonderful presentation and the very informative answers. I would like to go to the next. Yes?
I'm really want to add that, excuse me for my bad English, but I was expected to talk in Arabic, but I will make some diffusion. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Mervan.
Thank you.
And now we'll go to the next speaker. That is Sandra Iman Pratek. Dr. Sandra, are you ready?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sandra is going to give us a reflection from a practitioner's perception, what she has been able to observe, some of the backlash, some of the challenges, some of her experience that she's been able to see in promoting gender equality in Islam. So welcome, Dr. Sandra.
Welcome. Thanks, Farida, for the introductions, and many thanks to previous speakers for excellent layout of theological basis and practical application. And the lived reality of applying this theology into real life is challenging, as we all know. And today I would like to share with you some reflections that I have accumulated over years of working as gender practitioner in the humanitarian sector and also as activist and researcher. So I will talk about the backlash against gender equality that I noticed everywhere, and I will reflect how we can counter this backlash by promoting gender equality through faith values. So we all know faith values play a very important role in the lives of many people. There are studies showing that still 8 in 10 people identify with religious affiliation. So, well, faith values can be important resources to promote gender equality, but as we know, they can also be used to resist change. And sometimes the boundaries between the conservative and progressive values are quite blurred. What I see is that people can combine progressive and regressive faith values simultaneously across this values continuum. I don't have time to go to examples, but I hope you can imagine yourself or meeting someone who can have a progressive and regressive faith value, conservative on some points and progressive on other points. So there is no fixed solution. Well, people might mix and depending on the situation. So as we live in different regions, wherever you are, we know that gender equality persists across regions, across religions, across different socioeconomic conditions. And this includes numerous Muslim countries. In my experience, I witnessed that this comes from both women and men who manifest this backlash against gender equality. First, I believe it's basically driven by misunderstanding the terminology of gender and equality. Many people in the Muslim world and elsewhere take it as a Western invention that is associated with radical feminist notions, and therefore it's seen as a threat to family or community order. And I noticed that terminologies such as justice and equity appear to be better received in various communities. Surely equality, which I understand as recognizing equal importance of human beings, regardless of their gender, and equal access to opportunities for everyone, and equity, which I see as a process of fair treatment according to needs, are mutually constitutive and build justice. We can't talk about equality without equity and vice versa. Yet Muslim activists draw on Islam as a liberating movement for all these concepts, equality, equity, and justice, long before feminists started, as many would claim. And women activists are often stigmatized, scapegoated, and silenced. They are often labeled as feminists, even though their motivations may be based on faith and not necessarily on feminist, or they may combine both feminist and faith motivations. So often, activists' spiritual commitments to enact equality, justice, and equity might be questioned by local communities for threatening the social order, challenging power holders. Also, in some settings as minorities, Muslim activists can experience anti-Muslim sentiments and be labeled or associated with radical groups. So how do I use faith values to counter the backlash? In my personal experience, I would like to share with you how I used it to some degree when I was a senior policy advisor on gender at Islamic Worldwide. That's where I deployed a faith-sensitive gender mainstreaming strategy to promote social justice, equality, and equity in their relief and anti-poverty programs. So I felt that faith and gender-sensitive perspective was essential for the success of this policy, gender justice policy of Islamic Relief. I merged the practical and policy considerations with the faith considerations. For instance, in the global consultative process on gender policy, that was a long time ago, 2014-15, I built on faith to justify why gender equality must be promoted in faith-inspired humanitarian organization. Faith values, I noticed, spoke to people and united various points of view to the core religious beliefs, for example, such as human dignity of all humans and to stand firmly for justice. For example, there's a number of Quranic resources supporting and encouraging people to stand for justice and equality and equity. There is chapter 4 titled Woman Al-Nisa, where God calls all believers to stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to God, even against yourselves or your parents or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor. Yet multiple systems of oppressions continue, and bias against women and gender equality persists. And there's a number of faith resources that faith-inspired activists and practitioners use to progress a Muslim case for gender equality. For example, I'm sure you know the story of creation. I believe it is a powerful resource to resist gender backlash. It indicates that everything was made in pairs as an integral and equally important element of the universe. One could not exist without the other, indicating that gender equality could be indeed seen as a state of the universe, as everything was designed in pairs. And another verse of the chapter on women, chapter 4, starts from emphasizing the equality of the souls among women and men, what Dr. Mervat has mentioned earlier. And yes, let's be clear that equality never meant to mean sameness, but equal access to opportunities and rights. And the Quranic teachings indicate people should not be judged based on their gender roles, but based on piety and good deeds, as my previous speakers recalled. And while the divine measures do not rank one gender above another, people often value actions of women and men differently. Still, socially constructed measures appear to have greater significance than what matters to divine God's conduct doesn't matter really to humans. We like to judge ourselves based on looks and who we are. Yeah, nevertheless, Muslim campaigners continue to use the scriptural approach to challenge misconstructed social religious interpretations and to advance women's status, including the right to work and attain education, own earnings, manage inheritance, and so on. Also, Muslim campaigners advocate drawing on the legacy of the Muslim women role models, the leaders who contributed to society across Islamic civilizations, and the Prophet Muhammad's resourceful tradition, including his call to honor one's mother, promote fair treatment of women, and preserve women's rights. As a way forward, I believe we need to continue this debate on women's rights and Islam, engaging scholars and practitioners. We need to support activists to reframe gender equality debates in Muslim communities. And we need to develop faith literacy and more women's rights trainings to help more women, men, and children with varying literacy levels to learn about and claim their rights. Finally, gender equality means working with men as well to address their specific needs, especially in crisis and forced displacement, to support them to regain their sense of self as loving fathers, husbands, and contributors to the community. Thank you for your attention. Ready for your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Sandra. That was very good, and congratulations on the work that you do. Just a few questions based on what you just presented. So how do we strengthen the voices of women actually in trying to get rid or in fighting some of the stereotypes that actually face gender roles? So how do we strengthen their voices afterwards?
Well, to strengthen women's voices, we need to do groundwork at all different levels: the family level, neighborhood, community, and national policies. I believe it starts from education and media coverage. We need to ensure women's voices are heard and represented there. Our education systems, the early education, must embed gender and faith perspective across different levels of education to promote equal treatment between boys and girls and mutual respect. While we should definitely learn to respect women's voices, the same as men, but given that women have been silenced, we need to be more attentive to listening and to create platforms for women to speak out at different levels. Well, we could go into details, but I guess there are even more questions that are coming up. So.
Also, how can institutions or organizations such as CSOs leverage on the work of faith-based organizations in advancing gender equality? How can they collaborate? How can they, Yeah,
of course, as civil society organizations and faith-based organizations, should work together. They should develop mutual understanding. We need to develop stronger dialogue between organizations that we work with to understand the values that connect us and perhaps the differences that we should celebrate, not take as basis for this agreement. Well, the civil society organizations, well, I would advocate that they should recognize that faith plays a very important role in many people's lives, and they identify with religion. So it is an important part of their lives and the way they experience the world. So it's important that CSOs try to engage with this dimension of people's realities and leverage this dimension to build on the faith, on the religious resources that are there, the beliefs, the practices and experiences and organizations that are out there. Well, while CSOs can work with faith communities and draw on the potential of these religious resources, they could do it to raise awareness of communities on gender equality, using all the different legacies and traditions that support women's status and their rights. And it would be great to integrate faith perspectives into ongoing programs that are aiming to transform social norms, so we can recognize religious factors as protective and risk factors in promoting gender equality, so we can mitigate the risk factors that are out there. We know that interpretation is a challenge and people's literacy levels is a challenge, so we should mitigate it. CSOs should be willing to engage with this dimension to mitigate the potential harms and protective factors, the range of beautiful wealth of traditions that can help people to build resilience and strengthen the capacity to promote women's rights and resist injustice. And likewise, FBOs, faith-based organizations, should be open to work with the CSOs. It's a two-way street, right? And FBOs should be willing to develop dialogue with those organizations that might be, well, not necessarily agreeing with them on everything that FBOs stand for. We need to work in diversity and appreciate different ways of doing things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandra. And thank you to all the speakers and the good work that you do. So I would like to go to the next session, and that is to get some few questions from the participants or the attendees. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. You'll be unmuted, and I think we can choose from there. But on the question and answer section, we do have a few questions that I can start with as we wait for the others maybe to raise their hands. I think we do have a question here from an anonymous attendee. Can you talk about the death of Mahsa Amini? Apologies if you have addressed it elsewhere. This is my first webinar. The death of Mahsa Amini, I think the incident that I talked about when I introduced the webinar. We also have another question. In relation to women's rights in Islam, where do we find most barriers? Please allow me to give this question to Professor Ali Madoud to be able to answer this, please. In relation to women's rights in Islam, where do we find the most barriers? Yeah, can we answer the two first before going to any other question? Who would like to talk about?
Maybe I'm going.
Okay. That's fine.
Maybe I'm going to... Okay, I'm going to respond quickly about the two questions. First of all, relating to the incident in Iran, we so deeply apologize about the sadness of what happened there about the women's right in Islam relating to the clothing. So I think relating to the clothing is there are many interpretations, not only one single interpretation, but sometimes sometimes there are people or community, even country, only use one single interpretation to legalize the policy that they have. But I think in reality, in Muslim community, there are many interpretations related to the hijab and also the aurah. One is relating to this is a compulsory. The other one is not compulsory, because the compulsory is how to cover the aurat, not always relating to the hijab. Yeah, so I think we have to also see the asbabul nuzul, yeah, the reason why the ayah An-Nur 31 and Al-Azab 59 and also the hadith of Asma about the hijab, yeah. Because if we look at in the Gulf country, actually this is not only by wear by Muslim, yeah, but also by other religions, by other religion. It means sometimes it might be, it's not religious clothing, but it might be something geographical or maybe cultural clothing. Or some people wear this clothes is for the strategic clothing, because they want to someone listen what their idea, so they use this one for strategic clothing. But for some feminist Muslim, wearing the hijab is part of liberation. It means it's not oppression, but part of liberation. Liberal, that mean liberation means that is depend on my convenience, which one the clothes that cover to my hair. But the feminist Muslim not send someone to the hell. No, not sending someone to the hell because of the clothing, but because they feel that this is good for me. Yeah, I'm feeling comfortable with this one. Yes, so for feminist Muslim, sometimes the hijab is part of liberation, not part of oppression. And the second question relating to the most barrier, yeah, the most barrier that faced by feminist Muslim or also women activists in Muslim world. I think the conservative and textual interpretation sometimes is quite the most barrier, because I think that is still the beginner of Islam. The beginner of Islam sometimes just put on the textual and conservative. For example, if someone want to the heaven, is because of there are many, what is in English, bidadari, angels. I don't know in English, yeah, bidadari angels, because the women angels over there, not angels, yeah. I don't know in English, yeah. I mean the beautiful women is in heaven, because there are many beautiful women in heaven. So I think that is the Islam beginner. But if the advanced Muslim, they want to go to the heaven because want to see the Allah, want to see the God, and the both ayah normative work is over there. It depends on sometimes which one that we are going to legitimize what our argument. But for me, because the Prophet Muhammad around 23 years, so sometimes in the beginning and also in the advance, people sometimes only just take in the beginning Muslim, not until the advanced Muslim. As the example, if we are going to the heaven only for this to see the beautiful women is beginner. But if we want to the heaven to see Allah, that advanced Muslim. Yeah, so sometimes the most barrier is textual and conservative understanding without looking at the causes or asbabul wurud and asbabul nuzul, and also they don't understand comprehensively the relation between this ayah and other ayah, and also between the ayah and hadith.
Farida, I also want to add something in regards to Mahsa. I think it's it's very important to look at this from the political Islam context, because like Professor Ali Matul said, that a lot of times it's a particular state definition of Islam. And so we have to adhere to that. I'm originally from Malaysia, so I'm Melayu. I was born, raised Muslim, but my Islam that I was raised on is very different from the Islam of today. in my society at that time, we didn't wear the hijab at all. And but what is actually probably more important is that when you have the issue of moral police, even in Malaysia, we have the moral police. We have that in Saudi Arabia, even though that is changing right now. The fact that we have a moral police takes the Quran gave us the right to self-determination, gave us the brain to say, use it. It's very clear in the Quran. It also says in the Quran that you have the right to choose your path. And so if you are wanting to meet God, Allah in heaven, that's your journey, then you make those choices based on your particular spiritual religious journey. It is not for the state to take that right away. By the state taking that right away from your responsibility as a Muslim, then that itself has released you from the responsibility of your actions or your non-action as a human being. So Islam is very much rooted in the fact that we have the brain to think, and then you have to make that responsible decision. And so therefore, including your religious practice decisions of doing good deeds or not doing good deeds, to pray or not to pray. And so by the state taking that right away, they have taken on that responsibility. So at the heart of it, the moral police is a contradiction to the teachings of the Quran.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you. We have some few questions still here. I would like to take this question to Dr. Mervat, if you are ready. In many religions, there is often a confusion between culture and what is cultural and what is religious. In this case, in the case of Islam, and how can the differences be clarified to help people understand what is religious and what is cultural? I think that has been observed a lot, even in the country that I am in. Some of the things that people put forward as laws in Sharia in Islam are usually just cultural laws that are penetrating into the religion and being confused to Islam. So Dr. Mervat, maybe, how can people be helped to clear some of those differences?
Actually, because we are concerning about Sharia, and culture can be one of the obstacles that can be for explaining some problem that happen, or some feature that happen in the society. You know, but because we are a center for training, and we concern about actually about medical concern. So culture, we take the problem of FGM, which is a culture, FGM, which is the culture deeply rooted in the community. We explain it with the what's Sharia, what's Islamic Sharia say about this issue. And we make like many program concerning this one of the obstacles that we face it actually in explaining culture with the Islamic rules and Islamic Sharia. And we are working hard on this through programming, training program for male and female religious leaders concerning this issue as one of the problems that we face in Egypt.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mervat. I would like to take this to Dr. Sandra. There is a question here on the misunderstanding of feminism. And what is a feminist vis-a-vis gender equality?
There are different concepts of feminism. That's what we need to begin from. And I think what is what are people against in Muslim environments? In some Muslim environments, are there radical feminists? In my personal view, I think feminists obviously came from a group of oppressed people. Women have been historically oppressed. We know, yes, we believe as Muslims that women were empowered and liberated when the Quran came, but unfortunately over years, it didn't trickle down to, not each society adapted the provisions that are given for women's rights in the Quran. And even obviously in the Muslim world is a great example how it doesn't work, how people came with their own ideas, how it should be implemented, and women's rights are neglected. And in the early 20th century, and at the end of the 19th century, we know that the feminist women who have been oppressed stood up for their rights, and that's how the movement has been created, and it continues until today. There were different branches of feminists. I believe that it started from like radical feminists who felt that men are basically oppressing women and everything is of the fault of men, that the world is bad because men are oppressing women. And this shifted to intersectional feminists, where women realized it's not only about men being bad, or men realizing within this consideration of gender dynamics, it's all different layers of oppressions and different inequalities that are perpetrated by different actors and are centered around different identity markers, not only gender, not only being women or men, but it's around age and around race and ethnicity and all different things that people like, disabilities and all this, that people are targeting others for if they want to oppress them. The problem, so the question is the misunderstanding of feminists. I don't want to say too much, but in the meetings I attended, often men and women themselves would say, we don't like feminists because it takes our roles as women away. It takes the men's leadership away in the family. Therefore, I think it's a misunderstanding of feminists. Feminists didn't mean that women will be ruling over men. I think it's about balancing powers between women and men, working in partnership, as some of our speakers spoke earlier, that we are supposed to be partners as women and men. So there are obviously people who will say feminism and Islam is mutually exclusive, but there are others like Susan Harland, I believe, she speaks about feminism and Islam being not mutually exclusive. There are probably no basis for exclusion. The Islamic case, the Muslim case supports, there are probably lots of different joint points that support women's rights, and feminism emerged because the Muslim values didn't trickle down to all the communities. So women had to stand up for their rights, and Muslim women joined this movement, or may say they are Islamic feminists on their own without necessarily signing under the feminist project. It's very complicated, and it would be useful to have perhaps a separate webinar on that. But I believe there are lots of, it shouldn't be a point of disagreement, because both feminists and Muslim are standing for women's rights and balance. Well, maybe the issue of the balance is here, where people think radical feminists want to take over the balance over men. And this is the issue. But in my view, intersectional feminists and Islamic values go quite in parallel. But these are my personal views. I will leave it here. I'm not the best person to explain it, perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Sandra. We have a question here from Russia that goes to Annie. Thank you all for the great insights. My question to Annie: I think the work being done with the Islamic society is great, but my question, which also links to collaboration with the government, how do you think othering based on religion, for example, in data collection and so on, could increase resistance to changes in societal practicing of Islam? How non-Muslim societies are being also targeted to avoid othering based on religion? Did you get the question?
I think I do. It's a bit confusing about the othering part. As far as in the societies that we work in this particular case in Burundi, where the Muslims are the minorities, There is, and the othering in this case is both ways, is the Muslims who have self-othered themselves by way they dress, by the language they speak, and by not associating with the larger community, the non-Muslim community. And the othering that comes from the government and the non-Muslim society members of the community is also a way of the lack of trust between the two. I think as a Muslim here in the United States, there is also the suspicion of the othering of Muslims themselves. Now, not necessarily, well, it depends on the government that we have, right? Because when we had Trump, we were very much othered, but when we are here now with Biden, we are not othered. We are actually very much being included. So I think the dynamics of the politics is unfortunately the othering process. And I think it's really important as minorities, regardless of what religion you are, because the second part of the question was addressing non-Muslims. I guess it doesn't really matter whether you're in a Muslim majority country or a Muslim minority country. I think it's really important to participate and to be involved in the governance and in the election process. Even here in the United States, you have pockets of American Muslims who say who in the mosque will say, the imams will say, you are not allowed to vote because this is a kafir government and we cannot vote for a kafir government. So if this is happening in the United States, then you can imagine it also happens in other societies as well. And I wanted to also, there was another question about the ex-Muslims. If I may address that one, because living in the United States, we have ex-Muslims living openly and also in Europe. Sadly, what I find with ex-Muslims, because I support their right to leave Islam. There's no compulsion in faith, chapter 2, verse 256 in the Quran, it's very clear. I support their right to leave Islam. However, what I find that a lot of them, they are also very hateful towards Islam. They're very anti-Islam because of their particular understanding of Islam. And this is because of their particular way they were raised in their understanding of Islam. If you look at a lot of Iranians in the United States, a lot of them have actually left Islam. And some of them have converted to Christianity because they find that the Islam they were raised on is oppressive. It does not come from love and compassion. And I philosophically live by my philosophy of Islam of love and compassion. And so, but I do not fault them for it because this is their upbringing. And if you look at the way Mahsa was killed and how there's such an upheaval and oppression in the name of Islam, you can understand why a lot of Muslim youth in the Muslim world are actually leaving Islam. They have declared themselves as atheists. So for me, I think the incident of Mahsa being killed is just another fire for these ex-Muslims, especially the hateful ones, to use against Islam. And this is unfortunate. For me, most of the time, I really ignore what they have to say because they come from hate. And for me, they are no different than those within the Muslims who also preach hate. They're the same. So I leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I also have another question, specifically on issues of gender equality. If we observe today's conversation, we see that it has been dominated by women, and all the papers here and all the panelists are women. How can we bring on board more men? What strategies can we bring out? Or what are some of the things that we can, and the approaches that we can use to bring more men into this conversation and to get their buy-in into gender equality? And I saw Dr. Sandra said something about gender equality is not really, we're not looking for the sameness in terms of, the physical looks and the physical abilities, but we are looking for equality, representation of resources, So how do we bring men on board? How do we bring them into this conversation and have them as advocates for gender equality? Anyone can take this.
Yeah, maybe I can try to address this question. But before to that question, maybe I just add give additional explanation about the feminist issue, because I wrote a book, Feminist Muslim in Indonesia, and then in my research, I found that the term feminist is controversial term, not only in the West, but also in Indonesia, but relating to the stigma association, negative stigma, negative association that's more riskier to women than to men. Because if women identify themselves as feminists, the negative stigma associated with them, for example, they try to control their husband, for example. They do not want to receive the reproductive task against the kodrat. So there are many negative stigma associated to women. But if men call themselves as feminists, they are more appreciate, because if men call them feminists, means that men will have domestic tasks, will have the caring giver, and will have their wife. So more positive stigma, more positive association to men instead of to women. So that's why in my research, I found more male call themselves as feminists than female, because of that as a negative stigma. Yeah, and also I think I call myself as feminist, although there are many challenging I face. For example, you are feminist, why you are still wearing hijab, for example? And in the right wings from the conservative people also question my religious practice. For example, Prof. Alim is feminist. Are they still prayer? Is she still fasting? So maybe my prayer, my fasting is questionable because I'm feminist. So that's why I'm trying to integrate it, yeah. To be feminist and to be religious person in Muslim community is okay for me. It doesn't matter. We try to find the closest values, yeah, between feminist and also Islamic teaching, because feminist and Islamic teaching is compatible. Although there are some people who believe that feminist and Muslim is not compatible, but for me it is compatible. And relating to the gender equality, how the strategic, the effective strategies for what is this, strengthening the gender equality in the society. So for feminist Muslim experience, first, we have to mastering all normative work. The bayani level, we have to master. We have to understood, yeah, we have to understand the asbabul nuzul, asbabul wurud, all the verses and hadiths relating to women's rights. And the second one is trying to give the real data and also real example. If we implement gender equality idea, we can also be a happy person, happy family, and then the community love us. And include male, yeah, in our strategies. Not only female talking about women rights, but also involve male to be a focal point to talk about gender equality. So this is part of our strategy in Indonesia, and include the policymaker, our leader. For example, we always invite our leader to be a keynote speaker, but the list of issue of gender equality we already provided. So that's why, so the leader will study and then will read in more detail what gender equality. So this is one of the strategy to invite male leader in the institution to be keynote speaker in our program. But we already have a list what they're going to talk. So using others to promote our idea. I think that's one strategy, yeah? And also not forget to make TikTok, to make YouTube, and also media preaching, yeah, lightening for make fun and also precise word in our media with using any platform to deliver our idea. I think that's the strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Alimatun. Just trying to check from the participants if anyone has raised their hand for a question.
I wonder if we addressed the question about culture and religion.
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, that's a very good question. Religion and culture are very much related and intertwined, and it's very difficult to see what's actually cultural, what's religious. And it can be very difficult and harmful to community members if certain practices are implemented based on the belief that it is part of one's religion. Maybe I will recall an example from Ethiopia, from the Somali region of Dekas of Woreda, Woreda. It's on the border with Somalia, Ethiopia and Somalia. So it was part of the project I was doing on FGM over there, and female genital mutilation or cutting. And the woman that I met there, and the project that we implemented was a series of community conversations to help distill what's cultural and what religious, to help people realize what is my religion saying for me to do regarding this issue of FGM. And long story short, the woman believed that this is religious practice, and after a series of workshops with religious leaders, when they learned that this is actually not allowed in religion and it's not part of any Quranic verse or hadith, they cried and they asked for repentance. They realized that this is not a religious practice, that is a cultural practice that has been inherited over centuries from generation to generation. And there are a number of different practices that I could recall. What is the issue here is that it's very difficult to separate, that they are inseparable. Well, there is no culture without religion, and probably religion without culture, we know it, they are mixed. But there are some tools maybe for people working in programs using detailed gender analysis or intersecting gender analysis, where you look at different influences, different factors of cultural norms and social norms and then economic influences and political forces, where you could aim to distill whether this comes from religion or from other forces. Simply consulting with well-educated, trained religious leaders might be a way forward. Simply asking them whether this is a religious practice or not probably will give you an answer. But some religious leaders themselves may not have this level of education. They might be believing that certain practices are actually religious, but they are cultural. But in majority of cases that I came across, religious leaders normally have the level of understanding to challenge early marriage, which obviously is a cultural practice, not religious. Although there are weak contentions around these issues, and we need to find the religious leaders who have capacity to advocate against harmful, what we call them, harmful traditional practices, building on the Islamic resources to counter early marriage, forced marriage, FGMC, domestic violence, you name it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandra. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions on this section. So I would like just to give a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, to each of the speakers.
Actually, the last point is very important, actually, violence against women. And because in our center, we set a plan to promote gender equality and gender and FGM for the FGM and child marriage and all this program, we take care of it by preparing manual books and written by most eminent scholar. We design also and implement a training program for male and female religious leaders so they can be aware about this point of a medical point or cultural point, and we try to explain from the Islamic Sharia. We also, as a center, International Islamic Center, we set many traveling seminar. We we call it a caravan, in which a group of experts visit countries to promote and advocate for women's rights. Also, as we said, a public awareness seminar, and we go to every governorate to explain what's wrong with gender equality. Awareness seminar also we set for student from Al-Azhar University. The students are today are the leader of tomorrow. So we take care of these points actually to educate them from all gender equality, because we have a separate school for girls and a separate school for male and female in other university. But we try to gather them and give them collected seminar to explain many issues about equality. Conducting roundtable discussion actually and webinar about all this issue. Educated religious leader is very important, and we try hard actually since long time ago to give them knowledge about many medical, and we try to explain this by Islamic Sharia, by expert from Islamic Sharia.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to give my closing remark relating to the methodological point of view when we understanding the religious belief, when we talking about gender issue. Feminist Muslim using hermeneutic approach and also history or historical approach, and also using language analysis. For example, we differentiate between rijal and zakar. Arijalu qawwamuna 'ala nisa. Rijal here means close to the gender issues, which is when we talking about marriage is zakar wal unsa. Zakar mean sex, biological man, yeah. So that's why when we talking about marriage, yeah, in Indonesian context is relating men and women. So using language analysis is also very important to get the closest meaning what God wants, what Allah wants, and also what the Prophet Muhammad example. And the last one, I think one of the scholar in Indonesia, Ahmad Safi'i Ma'arif, who already passed away couple months ago, he said in his writing relating to women issue, he give a conclusion that men, you have to proud of a women achievement movement. Don't worry, women will not dominate you as far as the women back to the Quran. So I think that is powerful for feminist Muslim. Yeah. So again, he give nasihat. He give a conclusion in his writing that men, don't worry, you have to be proud of women achievement. Yeah. Don't worry, women will not dominate you as far as women back to the Quran. So I think that's the good and then the powerful word that feminist Muslim believe. And then because the purpose of feminist Muslim is try to back to the Quranic values, which is justice and also happy, rahmatalil alamin, khaira ummah, and umatan wasaton. I think that's my conclusion statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Sandra, you have anything to say?
Yes, just very quickly, I would encourage all of us to stand for our rights, to be confident in the heritage that we inherited, and to help others to learn about the God-given rights in whatever faith tradition we belong to, as they are all across different religions. And I encourage, similarly as the language of the Quran, which is quite powerful, is that God addresses women and men quite separately. That God as an entity addresses women and men, and this is showing me this gender sensitivity. It's, well, I'm not speaking fluent Arabic, so I cannot understand it, but many of the misinterpretations come from the issue that there's lots of assumptions that interpretation relates to men only, but often men are meant women and men together as mankind. So anyway, going to the gender specific language, whatever professions we are doing, I would like us to try to embrace gender sensitivity in whatever we do, to ensure that we respect different needs and respond to our aspirations and build on our capacities that are unique. Whoever we are powerful human beings. And yeah, to ensure that as women, men, and all the humankind, we just are guarding this earth to continue in the right direction, and gender equality is an essence for us to progress as humankind. So let's just find ways, Muslim or whatever religious affiliations we have, faith-inspired ways to do it, and there are ways, and may God bless us. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Sandra. Thank you very much. Annie, before I give it to you, allow me to say something towards the closure, and then I'm going to give it to you to finish up and also give us a short prayer to complete the session. Okay? So I would like to appreciate the speakers for availing their time to tell us a bit about what they do and their perspective on gender equality in Islam. I would also like to thank Faith to Action Network for being able to organize such a very good platform to have this discussion. And I would also like to thank all the attendees for listening keenly, for asking very difficult questions, and for engaging us in this discussion here today. What I would say is the issue of gender equality is still a scary topic in most of the paths that we work in, not only in Islam, but generally in the entire sphere that we work in. That is why you see in places like Kenya, where we work, there is the third gender rule representation, which says that in all institutions, the minority gender has to be represented by at least a third of the entire population. So that means that the issue of gender equality is not only embedded within whatever we discuss within the Islamic sphere, but generally in the whole world. There's a lot of work that has been done before in promoting gender equality, but there's still much more work that needs to be done even afterwards in ensuring that gender equality is a sustainable movement, and that it's something that will not end up oppressing either any gender that is there. And as time goes by, we see the introduction of different types of gender. So even as we are talking about gender equality, we see that it's not even something that is rigid. It is very versatile and it keeps changing every day. So I think it also gives us some food for thought that when we are talking about gender, we need to think about what is evolving, what are the new things that are coming in, what are the new roles that are being introduced, also so that we do not threaten the existing structures that are there to ensure that they also cooperate within the gender equality agenda. So thank you all very much. I would like to give this to Annie to give us her closing remarks and also finish the webinar with a word of prayer. Welcome, Annie.
Right. Thank you, Farida. From my observation in the work, working in the field as a Muslim human rights defender, what I realize a lot of times when we use terms like gender equality or feminism, that in itself is a barrier. Sometimes it's easy just to lead by the values. So, for example, when people or imams are preaching against, are preaching saying that a woman's place is at home, it's easy to say, well, hang on a second, wasn't Khadija, Prophet Muhammad's wife, a very successful trader? She wasn't a trader by staying at home. She was out and about. Aisha, all these examples in our Islamic history, we have a rich history of a strong women role. And I think when you lead by examples with stories like that, it debunks that hard-lined or misogynistic interpretation of Islam. And that also, when you tell it by stories and by values, it also is easier and more palatable to the lay person who doesn't know the Quran. They may memorize the Quran, but they don't actually know what the Quran says. So I think this is one way of having an impact and moving people's hearts in the direction towards justice. And again, I always come back to the dichotomy or the contradiction between the justice in the Quran and the actual application of Islam in the field. And sometimes these perpetuate these differences. This disconnect is perpetuated, unfortunately, by religious leaders themselves. There's a really deep philosophical discussion that we have to have, and that is, what kind of Islam, what is the Quran really trying to teach us? And what is the guiding principles in which, you know, we are supposed to serve humanity, all of God's creation. After all, God created everything around us. So that's my my closing remarks. I would like to thank Farida to end this program, this conversation, when Farida read the English translation of the Al-Fatiha. If you don't mind, I'm going to recite it in Arabic, and then I will follow with just a very, very short prayer for us before we depart. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. So the Al-Fatiha is a reminder to us to walk on the straight path, that is one of truth, of honesty, sincerity, and integrity. So as we go about our lives, may we be guided by these words, by the moral compass of justice. And may we also be inspired by the Quran to teach, to preach, and to live in the way of love, compassion, and mercy. Ameen.
Oh Allah, grant me light